That's such a good day when you realize your dad isn't a superhero. Most people would say that's a bad day. No, it isn't. It means you can actually have a real relationship with your dad now, because you could never have fully a real relationship when he was Superman to you, because it was always distorted through these rose-colored glasses. It would be really cool to have a father-son relationship as two adults where you're not idolizing him and you can see his humanity. Kipp, what's up, man? Great to see you. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Sounds like you got away on a little mini vacay.
Yeah, up to Bear Lake and on the Idaho side, and got some skiing in. Have you ever been up there skiing up at, I think it's called Beaver Mountain over by Cache Valley?
I've been up there a very, very long time ago, but I think I was so little that we didn't go skiing. It seems like I did tubing or something. I can't remember. I wasn't skiing or snowboarding up there, though.
Got it. It was great. Good snow. We got dumped on. I was a little nervous about getting home last night. It was that kind of weather, but not bad.
Well, I was in Salt Lake with my girlfriend and her daughter and my kids, and we were going to the Western Expo, and we got to about Provo, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's about 3 hours north of where I live. And she went up the canyon, up Provo Canyon, because that's where we're going to stay. And me and the kids went further north to go to Salt Lake for the expo. And then we went and caught a jazz game afterwards. But it took us an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 40 to get from Provo to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And then she was going to come down and meet us at the jazz game later. And she was coming down the canyon from Midway. Yep. And called me, and she's like, my map said, or texted me and says, my map says an hour and a half, hour and 45. So by the time she would have got there, and her sister and brother-in-law and their couple of their kids, I mean, the game would have been all but over. I'm like, you're good. We went and saw the game, but then we drove up the canyon. It was a little sketchy. It was, because the signs were on that said you need to have, what did it say? Something like you need to have traction devices, which chains essentially, or snow tires. I'm like, I don't have either. Let's see if we can make it. And we did okay. We just went really slow.
Yeah, it's wild. Last night, actually, on our way home, there's a pass south of Bear Lake. It gets a little sketchy in there. Kind of wind drifts across the road really bad.
Yeah.
And we're driving home last night, and the car completely backwards on the wrong side of the road, just hugged up into the mountain, and someone's trying to tow them out. You'll appreciate this, though. I'm like, hey, you guys got this? The guy's like, yeah, we're figuring it out. And I kept driving. And then the lady that was helping them tow, I'm like, you got this? She's like, no, we need your help.
Sounds like the difference between a man and a woman, for sure.
Totally. And so then we pulled over, and yeah, it was good that we pulled over, because this guy's like,
and you were able to pull him out?
Yeah. He's like, I have it hitched on the car. I'm like, where at? And I look, and he has it hooked on he has it like hooked on the brake line on the backside of the tire. I'm like, oh, dude.
Oh no.
You're gonna destroy your car.
No.
Like, hold on, right? And like, let's put it in the right spot. They had no idea what they're doing. But luckily we got him out, so it was good.
Hey, you did your good deed for the day.
For the month.
No, for the day. One deed turned daily, or however the Boy Scout motto goes.
It's daily?
Turn a good deed daily. I mean, holding the door open for a little old lady counts too. So it's a pretty wide range of what is acceptable. But in modern times, it seems like people are like willing to shut doors on little old ladies and flip people off as they're stuck on the side of the road. I mean, and I'm actually not exaggerating. Like, there's people who will laugh, people who are stuck on the side of the road, and there's men, grown men, who will drive by and laugh and say, it sucks to be them. What a loser.
Totally.
I mean, truly, it really is. We are in just degenerate times. So props to you for doing your duty.
Yeah, well, I had to bring it up on the podcast, so at least I can take credit for my one duty a year.
Well, that's the only way you get credit for it. You don't get credit for doing it. You get credit for talking about it. Did you make your Instagram post about it yet?
Yeah, I will for certain.
Okay, please do. Please do.
So you got a headline? What's on the mind? What's on the mind of Mr. Michler?
Well, I mean, the big headline is the U.S. beat Canada in the hockey match. I mean, that was just incredible. 3 fights in the first, whatever it was, 60 seconds, 90 seconds of the
9 seconds
game.
within 9 seconds of the game. Yeah.
Look, I think it's hilarious. I think it's funny, but there are real world consequences that impact economically our Canadian brothers and sisters and us as well. So I was kind of reveling in it a little bit, the fact that we won the game and started the fights and Canada was booing the national anthem. But my beef is not with Canadians. I mean, how many Canadian brothers do we have inside the Iron Council? Dozens, if not hundreds, right?
Yep.
My beef is not with Canadians. My beef is with your loser, Trudeau, and the government that is just raping and pillaging and taking advantage of you in every possible way they can. And you guys are allowing it. You're allowing it to happen. We had it happen over the last 4 years, but that's changed now. And sure, it's ruffled some feathers, but man, we've made changes that I think are going to positively impact not only our current economic and a situation and our stage in the global arena, but this is going to last for decades. Yeah. And these are the changes that need to be made. So my beef is not with the Canadians. My beef is with your government. And I have a general disdain for all government, including ours. I just wonder when you guys will have enough of your own that you do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the upset from the Canadian side? Is this
the upset? What do you mean by that?
Trump's remarks or wanting to do tariffs? Is that the driving factor?
Tariffs. Yeah, tariffs. Trump's remarks. Obviously, you have Trump's trollery with making Canada the 51st state. If I'm a Canadian, I'd be pissed too.
I would
if
be
he keeps calling
pissed.
Canada the 51st state, I'd be raged too, for sure. I mean, he's a masterful troll, and I don't think that will ever happen. I don't even think that's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
But the tariffs are an issue. But what people don't understand about Trump, at least the naysayers and the skeptics, is that Trump is pragmatic. He wants practical economic wins, and he does not like bad headlines. And you might say because of his ego or whatever, fine, I don't care. He does not want bad press. Now he gets it, but he doesn't want to be a loser. Yep. And so what people don't understand is that he's not using tariffs to make things harder or to enrich his friends or whatever people say. That's not what he's trying to do. He's a masterful negotiator. So he's using those as leverage. Yep. He's just dangling this stick out and saying, I'm going to beat you with this stick unless you do what we want you to do. And up to this point, most countries that have been threatened with a stick have complied, as they ought to, because we are the world's superpower, period. And because we're in charge, we make the rules. Don't like the rules? Don't do business with us. That's fine, but we'll win because we're in the position to do it. So we have the leverage. We spent the last 4 years playing victim, playing the loser card, playing the loser role, when clearly that's not the position we're in. We have a duty to be moral and to be ethical and to be charitable, but we also have a duty to take care of our citizens and be the world's superpower, because we are, generally speaking, a very moral country. So it's in our duties and obligations to wield that power in a very effective way.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Did you hear the response from, I think it was like the past prime minister or whatever of Africa when he was in his speech? Did you hear this?
Yes. Go ahead. I think you're talking about how he said, people don't owe us any money. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
I don't want to steal your thunder. Go for it.
Well, I don't steal my thunder because I can't quote him, but I wish I actually thought about it ahead of time so I could grab his quote, but it was profound. It was really great. And I love the mentality. He was making a
mockery of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so good.
I mean, it's the if you guys haven't seen it, go look it up. And I can't quote it either, but essentially he said, when America has started to shut off foreign funding, he basically said, yeah, they don't owe us any money. Trump is doing what's in the best interests of his citizens. The fact that we're just receiving handouts is laughable. And if we were in the same position, we would do the same. And he also said, we're the ones not handling our resources correctly. We're the ones that have government waste and unnecessary spending. It's our responsibility to handle our resources correctly for our own citizens, but it's not America's responsibility to take care of us. He's dead. He's saying things that half of our politicians, mostly liberals and Democrats, would never even dream of saying. And this is a guy from I don't know what country who's saying this. And I think people are waking up to the realities a little bit.
Yeah, that was good. All right, should we hop into questions, sir?
Yeah, let's do it, man. I think we got some good ones from Facebook today.
Yeah, we do. To join us on that Facebook group, that's facebook.com/group/orderman. Trevor Riley, how do you resolve the realization that you've put people on a pedestal that you can't realistically stand on? I'm disappointed to find a couple men in my circle aren't as high caliber as I initially thought. Still good men, but not the types that will help me continue to raise my game. Thanks for all that you do for the order.
Well, I think you took the first step. You acknowledge it, and you see that the guys that you put on pedestals probably don't belong to be there, and nobody does, quite frankly. Even the people closest to you, your kids, your wife, whoever it might be, they don't deserve to be on a pedestal. And you see that the guys that you put on pedestals probably don't belong to be there, and nobody does, quite frankly. Even for disaster. It's not fair to you to do that. And by the way, it's also not fair to them. If you have the woman in your life and you put her on this pedestal, now all of a sudden you're going to hold her this extremely high, unreasonable expectation. And the minute that she slips up, and she will, just like you will, then you begin to think less of her. And that's not fair to her. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to your children or other people who might be impacted by that relationship. So the first one is to acknowledge it. The second one is to realize that you aren't obligated to do much more in certain people's lives. To the woman in your life, I would suggest you are, because you made some commitments and you have some obligations and some responsibilities that you've agreed to uphold. But friendships, for example, or people that you like or look up to, you're not obligated to continue to maintain a relationship with anybody just because you guys have been friends, for example, for decades. That's not a thing. We talked about this last week. You might need to compartmentalize some of those people. Realize that they're flawed, realize they're human, realize you're flawed and you're human. Offer yourself some grace, afford them some grace, but also doesn't mean you need to keep them in your life to the degree that you are right now. And that's part of the process of rectifying you putting them on pedestals, is taking them off the pedestal and treating them like adults with accountability. So if I have a friend or a person that I care about and I've thought the world of them and they mess up, then I think as a friend, I would have some sort of responsibility to say, hey, man, I don't appreciate the way you're showing up right now. I would say that to you, Kipp.
Yeah.
I haven't put you on a pedestal, but I think highly of you. I look up to you. I think highly of you. And I also care enough about you that I'm willing to risk the relationship. If I saw you, for example, and I'm not even remotely suggesting this, I'm just giving
Thanks
this
for
as an
clarifying.
example. I want to make sure I'm clear about this. But if I saw you being inappropriate with another woman, you better believe, because I know you and love you and I know Asian love her, you better believe I'm going to say something to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I might alienate the relationship if I do, but that's the point of a friendship. Kipp, bro, you're towing the line with this woman or this thing you're doing or whatever, and like, what's going on? Help me understand, because from where I sit, I don't want to see you mess up like this. You got a beautiful family. You got a woman who loves you. What are we doing here? And that's what's required of a friendship, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. The last thing I'll say, and I want to hear what you have to say, is that we just have to lower our expectations of other people. That's it. In fact, I'm so on board with this thought process that I have standards of the way that people should show up. And that's subjective, by the way. But I have a standard of the way that I believe you should show up. But I don't expect you to do it. You get to make that decision. Yeah. And if you don't uphold the standard that I have, and to be fair, that I've communicated with you, that's not my choice to not be engaged in whatever sort of relationship we might have. That's your choice. So I have standards for myself and I have standards for other people. And as long as you're meeting those standards, we're good. If you're not, I'm going to let you know. If you continue to mess those up, I can't do this anymore.
Although not part of Trevor's question, there's a little bit of a dichotomy here, right? Where he's saying, you know, being a realist, dealing in reality that people aren't on these pedestals, but it's also in the root of him trying to be around guys that will continually raise his game. And so he might have this unmet expectation. It's always going to happen, right? That Trevor might keep looking for more high caliber guys to be around, and they're not going to be as high caliber as he thinks they are, right? And they never will be. I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this probably way more than I even have, but there's been people that I put on pedestals, whether it was their financial success or popularity or whatever, and you get to know them, you're like, yeah, there's just another guy. Right. Which is kind of refreshing, more than an issue per se. But how do you balance this as Trevor's like hyper focused on being around high caliber guys, and all these guys, quote unquote, may not be as high caliber as he thinks they are?
Well, when you said it's refreshing, I don't think generally people believe that. When you see a guy and you think, oh, this is just a normal dude, a lot of people are actually let down. But I think that's a big indicator that you're thinking way too highly of them. But if, on the other hand, you see, let's say you meet me in person and you realize I'm not really all that great. Like, I'm an ordinary guy. I'm pretty good at some things. I'm really terrible at other things. And we have conversations and you agree and you don't agree. And we just have like a human interaction. It should actually be empowering when you see somebody that you look up to, that they've achieved some level of success, however you might define that, but also can realize that this is a normal guy, because what that means is that you can also have success. It doesn't require some superhuman ability in order to achieve what it is you desire. An ordinary guy can do it, which means that you can, because you're ordinary. So the other thing I'll say on that, Kipp, too, is that if you're looking to people, let's say you want to be a bodybuilder. And I'm not in the bodybuilding world. I don't really know. Chris Bumstead, I think, is somebody who comes to mind as like a premier bodybuilder, right? So you look at Chris and you are inspired by what he does, and you're motivated, and you see all of his workouts he's doing, and you train like him and you work like him. Compartmentalize that. I don't know Chris personally. He's probably a regular dude, and he's probably really good. Well, we know he's really good in that world, and he's probably pretty terrible at some things. And that's not even an indictment against him. It's just being a human. Yeah. So take it for what it's worth. You don't know Chris. You just are inspired by his bodybuilding, and that should be enough. The minute you start attaching morality to it and making assumptions about how great and wonderful and Christ-like this human being might be, is the minute you start setting yourself up for success. If you see somebody who's extremely wealthy and you think to yourself, I want to be like that guy, compartmentalize that guy. That guy is really, really good at building wealth, but you don't know what kind of father he is. You don't know what kind of husband he is. You don't even know, frankly, if he built his wealth morally or not. So learn to compartmentalize. I thought this about Liver King, the fall of Liver King when he came out, and it's like, why are people disappointed? Did you really believe everything that he was saying? And if you did, shame on you, not shame on him. Be a little bit more discerning about where you invest your time, energy, and resources. Even me, even you. Listen to this podcast, get what you can out of it, but know we're moral and we screw up. I screw up all the time, and just live with that.
It's fascinating why we do this. I haven't thought about it, right? But just listening to your response to Trevor's question, I just can't help but think, like, why do we assume, I don't know, why do we put people on pedestals, and then, or we see greatness in a particular area, and then we just assume that's transcendent across how this person shows up in the world. And then there's this harsh judgment to how they, I don't know. It's fascinating. It's probably something I want to rat hole on a little bit around what's the psychology around it.
There's actually a cognitive bias. I'm pulling it up right now because I can't remember what it's called. There's the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's a little bit different. Oh, the halo effect. So here it is. The bias occurs when a positive impression in one area leads to an assumption of positive qualities in another unrelated area. For example, if someone is a great public speaker, people might automatically assume that they are also a skilled leader, even without evidence. I think without having the knowledge, my intuition is it's an efficiency code embedded in our brain.
To put them in a box really quick and make sense of
Right.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have to do it fast because we have to process this data really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So if he's a great speaker, I'm like, "Ooh, man, that guy's a
must
great
be great."
leader."
Yeah.
Right. And it's easy for us as human beings to process it that way. And we probably, most of the time, get it pretty accurate, but it doesn't always equate to that.
Yeah.
We see that, another place you see this is professional athletes.
Totally.
We think that because they're professional athletes, then they start spouting out about politics and we're like, oh, they must be, no, they have no idea. Or if you watch a commercial and, I remember some of my favorite heroes when I was growing up, like Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, these are like heroes of mine that I looked up to, and they're doing geriatric, like seats to sit down on the toilet to lift yourself up as a geriatric, like an old person. But we lend them credit because what does that have to do with them being a great football player? But we lend them credit because of this halo effect.
Halo effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Austin Chamberlain, how do you work on nurturing side of being a man? It's pretty easy to figure out how to grow as protectors, providers, presiders. It's in our nature, but how do we practice and get better at being empathetic, especially with wives and kids?
I'm skeptical, not skeptical. I'm hesitant to answer this question because I would never want it to come across as I know exactly what I'm talking about in this department. This is something that I really, really lack, especially with my kids. And I know it's mostly because I'm very impatient. And I think that is important. That is an important component of the equation is you have to know why you don't nurture or why you aren't empathetic to the degree that you would like to be. You wouldn't be asking this question if that weren't the case. But why is that the case? For me, it's a lack of patience. And then the secondary is that it's when my schedule and my commitments are too great. I have too much on my plate. When I don't have as much on my plate and when I've allotted myself the proper amount of time for certain things, I found myself being a lot more nurturing towards the people that I care about. It's the whole effect that you're like rushing out the door to get to the appointment or the game and your damn kid can't tie his shoes. Instead of getting down on your knee and saying, all right, let me show you. Here's the bunny ears. Put the rabbit through the hole, or however you teach your kids to tie his shoes. You're like, just put your damn shoes on.
Let's go.
Or just get the Crocs, get the sandals. We got to go. Like, get them, put them in the car. And that's where I become, anyways, less empathetic. So I would say that, understanding why. And then another thing that I would work on, that I do try to work on, is just trying to understand people's perspective by asking questions and not getting offended when they tell you things that are really hard to hear. I've had conversations in the past week where things have been said to me. I have this every week, every day, where I'm on social media, so every day I hear from people, warranted or not, that tell me things I don't like to hear. It's okay. Like, just try to understand where they're coming from. If somebody on social media blasts you about whatever, they're probably just a miserable person. And if you ask a question like, hey man, everything good? You'd be surprised. I've done that. You'd be surprised how many people message me and they're like, hey man, I'm sorry. I was a dick in that comment. My wife and I are going through a divorce, or I just lost my job. I have this happen weekly. My wife and I are struggling, or I was drunk. I've had people tell me that. I was drunk. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. You were pretty graceful about it. Now, I don't always do that. A lot of times I'll just fight back with them. I probably shouldn't do that. I should be more graceful. Or, you get into an argument with your significant other, instead of like proving your side of the point, just try to understand where they're coming from. And then when they tell you something, even if they say it wrong, and they will, just like you will, just understand it's not really how they're saying it. It's what they're saying and the meaning behind it. And shouldn't we want to know that? Even if it's painful, because their perception is the way they see it. That's reality for them. So you fighting against it, you digging in your heels, you having an attitude back doesn't change their perception of you. In fact, if anything, it probably just confirms their perception of you. Yeah. So there's a few things I'm personally working on.
Totally. Yeah, I think for me, especially when we talk about kids, and this is still the case even with my wife, but more so with my kids, it's when I'm not very empathetic, it's a result of me losing sight of my role in the bigger picture of what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I use the analogy of their room not getting clean, right, or them not hurrying, and I'm doubling down on the tactical win, right, of the room. I'm doubling down on the tactical win of not being late. And I've lost sight of the bigger picture, which is raising kids and developing them. And I've lost sight of that. And so I persecute them to get things done, right? And I see the gap constantly in what they're doing, and I don't look at progress or give myself the margin to have the necessary coaching to help them deal with whatever upset they have, you know? And so I think for me, it's just keeping that bigger perspective, right? My role here as a father is not to have a clean room, right? It's not to have my kids on time. It's actually to raise them, which means I have to have margin to help them deal with, or a margin for me to deal with, you know, them growing and figuring things out and being emotionally frustrated, and like, how do they process that versus, you know, stop whining, shut up, you know, let's go kind of mentality. So, but full disclosure, right? As I say all this, you know, I'm like, I struggle with this a lot. And there's certain, and it's funny how there's certain triggers. Like there's certain things, if they do those things, I lose my shit real quick. More than other things, right? And like whining or complaining about their circumstance is like one of the top ones on my list. Like if that happens, I know I'll get mad instantly.
It's funny you say that, because yesterday my oldest son there was a lacrosse game at the local university, and it was at 6:00 at night, and my oldest son wanted to go. I'm like, yeah, we can go. And I'm starting to see a trend of my kids just complaining about things.
Yeah.
And as they were complaining about a couple of things on the trip that we took up to the expo, I'm like, you know, when I was a kid, I would have killed for a trip like this. Like, I didn't have opportunities like this. We didn't go out to eat every night. We didn't have this beautiful home to stay in. We didn't have like trips. Like we didn't have that stuff. And I didn't pull when I was a kid, I had to walk uphill both ways in the snow. I didn't pull that. But in my head, I was thinking, imagine complaining that your dad took you on a trip where he took you to a jazz game, and then we went to this expo, and you're upset because you had to listen to him talk to a friend for 10 minutes while you were sitting there. Like, imagine that as a kid. And it got me thinking about what you said. So last night when we went to this game, we got in the car, and I got everybody packed up in the car, and I said, hey, I have 2 rules for tonight. And they were all receptive. They were all listening. I said, rule number 1, there will be no complaining. There will be 0 complaining. If I hear somebody complaining, there's consequences. Yep. Rule number 2, we're going to be kind to each other. You're not going to make offhanded comments. You're not going to poke at each other. You're not going to tease each other. Those are my 2 rules. If those 2 rules aren't met, I'm done. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
And for the most part, my youngest, he started to complain, but he fell asleep on my lap at the game, and he woke up and started to complain because he's 7 and just woke up. But I told him, I said, hey, look, remember, we already agreed. There's no complaining. And he just kind of moped and didn't do it. I'm like, that's fine. You can do that. I just don't want to hear about it. So I think the moral of the story is, at least I learned this yesterday and it worked well, is just bring up the stuff ahead of time and say, hey, this is how we are to behave in this environment. And then you can hold them accountable to something.
Yeah, and hold them accountable less emotionally. Like of a lash out when you do it that way.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Yeah. But again, disclosure, there was moments this weekend where I was the antithesis of that. So just want to be clear on that.
It's tough. Reps, Austin is the answer. Reps.
Yeah.
All right. Chris Soracati, and I looked up his pronunciation, Chris, so you're welcome. How do you tell your wife you're worried about her mental and physical health without getting her upset?
I mean, you're going to get her upset. What I would do is I would lead with something along these lines. And I'm just going to give you a couple guidelines I think might help a little bit. So the position of empathy, not accusation. So you're not accusing her of having a hard time with her physical health or mental health. You're
concerned.
You're concerned. Hey, babe, you seem to be more tired than you've been in the past, or you seem to be more irritable than you've been in the past. And I can't help but wonder if everything's okay, what's going on. An empathetic versus an accusatory approach. And the best way to do that tactically, I think, is to ask questions and let her come to the answer herself. Yeah. So it might be, hey, babe, like you seem, these last couple of weeks, I know it's been hard. You know, I've had a busy schedule. The kids have been crazy. We've got sports and this and that. And you seem to be a little bit more agitated than you've been in the past towards me and towards the kids. But how do you feel? The challenge with this is that if you're not good at doing this, that she might not really open up immediately because she knows either the angle you're taking or she's pretty clear about how you'll respond. So if you say, for example, how are you feeling? She's like, well, I haven't been feeling good. I've been tired and stressed about X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, yeah, it's because you do all these things and you shouldn't do those things. We as men are notorious for that. And if you do that, when you ask her, she's going to shut down. And next time you ask her, she's going to be less inclined to answer the question. The phrase here is, yeah, I can see how you'd feel that way. Or that must be difficult. Or why do you feel that way? Or have you thought about how you might address that? Again, you're leading, and I think it is leadership. You're navigating the conversation, but you're doing it with empathy and tact. And she's not dumb. She knows she feels like garbage. She knows she's down. She knows that maybe she's not as strong or, putting on a few pounds. Like, she knows all that. You're not going to tell her anything she doesn't. She's intimately aware of it. Every time she looks in the mirror, every time she gets out of bed, she's all stressed. She knows it more than you do. Trust me. Let her work through it, and you might need to guide and lead. And also, you might offer to do things together. If it gets to that point, let's say it's the physical fitness realm. Hey, do you think it would be cool if we maybe picked a fitness goal and did it together? Maybe it's a Spartan race, or maybe it's a 90-day workout program or whatever, and we do it together. So again, empathetic, it's teamwork. You guys are on a team. You're not accusing. You're saying, let's do this together if you think that would help you feel better. But I think if you navigate this correctly, she's probably going to be working through some of those issues. She already is, but this might help her come to some conclusions on her own rather than you having to be the one to suggest them. Yeah.
This somewhat goes without saying, but Chris, make sure you're modeling as well, right?
Good point. Yeah, good
this
point.
Is a much harder conversation when your health and physical and mental health is a mess and you're placing judgment, telling her that maybe she should, right? Like, and I know Ryan's not suggesting even taking that approach, but one of the best things that you can do is model it. Show her. You get more energy. You get your health in shape. You feel great about it. Right? And be okay where she is. Be careful, because often when we tackle something and someone else is not doing it, it becomes even more hyper. It becomes easier to place judgment. I always use the analogy. Years ago, I had a goal, and I've done this on and off about not using my phone at home. And I'm like, oh, I've never used my phone. Dude, it only takes the second day for me to instantly be pissed off that everybody's on their phones. Because I'm not, right?
Because you're not, right.
Supernatural to do that. So be careful. Be happy with where you are. Look to serve through love and empathy. But show her what that looks like if you're not.
I mean, yeah. Look, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's a pretty common answer. Like, oh, be the example.
I know, but part of my gut was like, yeah, but
I just don't know that the example is always enough.
Yeah. No, and I don't think it is. I think be the example and still have these conversations. Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
But don't just have these conversations and not be leading by example.
Yeah, I think I've just heard and I'm not suggesting you did, but I think I've heard too many people that'll just say, oh, you got to be the example. You got to be better.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Like, that's not all there is to it. I mean, that's a huge component of it, but make sure you have a well-rounded approach to this. And it might be something simple like, if it's the phone thing, it's like, let your people know what you're doing. Hey guys, I just want to let you know I've been distant the last couple of weeks, and I feel like part of the problem is I'm always distracted by this little device. So I'm going to take it upon myself to not have this at home and not be using this at home. And I want to invite you to do that with me. And now you're all working on it together, and they're, to your, this is a little bit from your playbook. They're bought into the idea a little bit more. And like, the other thing we have is these covert contracts where you're talking about, I'm not going to ever be on my phone. Nobody knows what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, no, they might say, oh, dad's a little bit more available than he's been in the past, but they're not thinking to themselves, oh, he has this challenge that he's no longer going to, they don't know. How would they know that? Unless you communicate it with them. So make sure you communicate what you're doing. I don't think you need to disclose all of your goals. There's certain things where it's just do it and let your actions speak for themselves. But if you want them involved, then I think communicating what you're doing would be a worthwhile goal.
Yeah. Elijah Henry, does the man whose voice has been on even more episodes than Ryan's voice ever listen to the podcast? And I think he's talking about the intro guy that you use.
Oh, I'm like, what does that even mean? He's asking the voice. No, the intro is a guy that I hired 10 years ago from Fiverr. And I said, I wrote the script. I'm like, this is what I want you to read. I don't even know who he is. He did a wonderful job 10 years ago. Is that what he means, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the only person I could think of that.
Read it one more time.
Okay. Does the man whose voice has been on even more episodes than Ryan's voice listen to the podcast? It has to be that.
Oh, I don't know. He should. If he doesn't, he should actually be. Now that I think, I never thought about this. He should be proud actually that he did that intro, because it's. I'm not tooting my own horn here, but it's pretty amazing for him to be on over 100 million downloads. That his voice has been. I've never thought about that.
He doesn't even know.
He might not even know, but if he does he get a little smile every time the podcast comes on and it's him? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go back and like reach out to him. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about this question. Interesting.
That'd be funny. Keep us updated. So John, the Rockman Johnson, had a similar question from before. I'll read it to see if you would add anything to his question. His question is how to deal with that moment when you realize your dad isn't superhuman, but just a man like you. Conversely, how do you react to that same moment when your son's making the realization about you? And it's kind of that pedestal question earlier, but on the dynamic of father and son.
That's an awesome day. That's such a good day when you realize your dad isn't a superhero. Most people would say that's a bad day. No, it isn't. It means you can actually have a real relationship with your dad now, because you could never have fully a real relationship when he was Superman to you, because it was always distorted through these rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
But now, and that's going to happen when you're older, and the beauty of getting older, my dad's passed away now, but the beauty of getting older, I guess I assume, I didn't really have a lot of these adult conversations with my dad. That's one thing I wish I would have been able to do, but from where I sit anyways, it would be really cool to have a father-son relationship as two adults where you're not idolizing him. And you can see his humanity. And, you know, when my dad passed away, I really won't get into the story right now, and I've shared it before, but I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to my dad. I had 30 minutes that I missed, a 30-minute window that I missed him by. And as I thought about what I would have said if I knew he was going to die, I actually would have apologized for not giving him the grace that as a man he deserved. He didn't get it all right, but he deserves some grace that I didn't give him. So I do now, but that's pales in comparison to being able to do that face to face. But yeah, that's a good day. Now you can have a real conversation. And regarding the relationship with your son, you should always be talking to your children about your own deficiencies. It should not be a day where they realize that, because they already know dad's human and he's flawed. And when he messes up, he fixes it and he says, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he talks to us about the lessons he's learned.
Yeah.
So I don't think, as a father myself, I don't try to put myself on a pedestal. I do say sorry to my kids. I do tell them things I'm working on. And I do say what needs to be said so they realize, like, I'm not perfect. And they know that. They see it. I might as well acknowledge it.
Well, and now you're in a position that you model how you fix things. I always think about this when I apologize to my kids, because I don't want to whenever I do.
Yeah.
Full disclosure. But I think, no, they need to see what an apology looks like. And that even me, I make mistakes and I clean them up and I say, hey, son, really quick, come over here. I got mad at you and I shouldn't have. And I'm sorry about getting a little too upset. And we talk through it. That's good for him, right? Not just me. I am luckily in this phase right now. Like, I feel like I'm in this phase right now with my 3 oldest boys. And it is actually super fun.
Yeah.
I don't think those 3 boys think I'm on some pedestal at all. And I almost feel like I'm just talking to another adult male that is kind of a friend. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love them more than I'd love a friend, but it's different and it's great. And they're way more open to talking with me about things than they've ever been because of that, you know? And my son, he's down in Vegas doing some electrical work, and he has some circumstances he's dealing with a, moron coworker. And he's like, Dad, this guy's out of control, right? And it's like, got it. Like, why do people drink? What do you think he's trying to suppress? Right? What is he dealing with? How do we navigate that? Right? And I'm sharing examples or suggestions to him that I'd share no different than with anybody else. You know, the fact that he's my son makes no difference. It's the same conversation, and we're more relatable to him because of it. So it's a beautiful thing when your kids, I think, when they get to the phase of seeing you for who you are.
It is interesting to me that we as men won't acknowledge our own shortcomings, as if other people don't see it because we don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, totally. They all know it.
Do you really think you're hiding something by not bringing it to the table? They already know you're an asshole. They already know you're impatient. They already know how short-tempered you are. They already know what your vices are. So you might as well just acknowledge it. And I think that's respectable, whether it's the woman in your life or children or friends, where you can acknowledge what's going on and share your plans to rectify it. And then as long as you're following through, I think it's something that's pretty respectable from other people.
Yeah.
Kids included.
Mitchell Snyder, serious question, full disclosure. What are you guys doing to prepare for the fact millions of men will lose their jobs to AI in automation and robots in the next 2 to 10 years? So what are you guys doing to prepare?
I don't know why you would say serious question. I think that, yes,
it's a legit
absolutely.
Question. Yeah.
That's a legitimate concern. And it has been forever.
Yeah. Yep.
I hope we all can acknowledge that. AI might be new technology, but the phenomenon of getting replaced by cheaper, smarter, faster, more efficient is not anything new.
It's always been a threat. Yeah.
Right. So stay out ahead of it. When I was doing financial planning, the big thing when I got started was the rise of what we would call robo-advisors. And a robo-advisor is an online platform or app that tells you how to rebalance your portfolio or how much to put, or even budgeting software and tools that, you know, if you spend $10.43 at the gas station, it automatically rounds up to 11 and puts that into a investment fund. These are all robo-advisors. They're advising you with your money, but they're doing it in automated and now driven through AI. And I saw the writing on the wall. Like, I saw what was happening, and I talked with a lot of veteran advisors, the old timers, who did not even see it. They weren't even aware of it. They wouldn't even, and even if they were, they would not acknowledge it. No. You know who else is notorious for this? Attorneys, CPAs, doctors, highly educated people can be very dumb when it comes to this and very ignorant. They think because they have a degree or specialized education that they're impenetrable from AI. And the reality is you're not. Lawyers are the first people to go. CPAs, are you kidding me? I can just scan all my documents into the computer and it could automatically, with precision, evaluate every little loophole, every tax code, current tax code, without any sort of user error at all. If you're a CPA, you better be shaking in your boots. Same thing with an attorney. What we really need to realize is, where's the creation? Where is your creation? And I think that's one of the things that AI is clearly lagging behind on, and I'm not sure we'll ever be able to do what a human being can do. So, for example, this podcast, I can automate editing. I can even have AI write a script for me. That's not the issue. The issue is, can I be empathetic? The issue is, can I get men together face to face, shoulder to shoulder? The issue is, can we identify problems that are on a human level that are outside of coding and numbers and zeros and ones? And more men need to start looking into that. If you're a doctor, there's going to be systems that you're going to stand in front of a scanner and it's going to scan your entire body and it's going to tell you have a likelihood based on your DNA of having this type of cancer, or we've identified these precancerous cells, we've identified these viruses or this bacteria in your body, here's what we prescribe. Are you kidding me? Like, if you don't believe that's going to happen, you're an idiot or just ignorant to it.
Totally.
So the reality then is not as a doctor to prescribe. That's not the value. Your bedside manner and your relationship with your patients is. So, yeah, AI might be able to tell you what's wrong with you and give you the prescription, but now you become a medical coach where you're encouraging this patient to follow their treatment plan. You're checking in with your patient to make sure that they're not just doing good physically, but mentally and emotionally. The more that you can create to our human level as opposed to this diagnostic, the better off all of us are going to be.
Yeah. It's all about the human connection. I've done consulting, IT consulting for, 20 plus years. And it's interesting how often we think, and it's all about just understanding human behavior. We think, at least from an IT consultant perspective, that the client is paying us to implement said technology, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to pay these guys, they're going to implement the technology. And as long as we implement technology to spec, project successful. Well, could the client maybe figure it out on their own? Actually, they could.
Sure. Yeah.
So what is it that they're paying us to do then? They're paying for the peace of mind. They're paying to offload the stress of making sure it's done right. They're building for confidence that it's being done correctly, right? Like it's so much more than just the tech itself. I always use this analogy, and I always say this too, because I can never remember the study, so I won't reference it very well. But there was a study around the number one detractors to malpractice for physicians. Number one, what do you think it is? Likability. Not quality of work, not anything else. It was my physician likable? And let me say it even this way. How often do you like someone that you don't think likes you? So really, when we say likability, what we're saying is they like me. My physician likes me and I like them. And that is the number one deterrent to malpractice lawsuits. It's no different than anything else in life. Yeah. We're humans. It's the human element of it that needs to be addressed. And then embrace it. You got to embrace it. So like specifically to Mitchell's question, right? Like, do I use AI? Absolutely. I use it all the time. And I will continue to stay in front of it. Why? Because I need to know how to take advantage of it. And then I need to pivot, right? Based upon what it does really well. And I got to be willing to let go of, oh man, I used to do that really well, but this does it better. So I'm going to let go of that skill and those duties. And I'm going to focus on another area instead. And so our ability to pivot is critical.
There's an analogy I've used in the past regarding construction workers. You know, all we used to have is probably a wooden hammer, and then it became a metal hammer, and then we got introduced to hydraulic nail guns. Imagine a carpenter saying, I'm not going to use that nail gun because I do it the real way.
And it threatens my job, so I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you could use the nail gun and build 10 times the houses that you did last year and put people into, because isn't that really what you want to do? Put people into beautifully and articulately constructed homes so they can build families out of? Isn't that the goal?
Yeah.
So imagine if you could do that at 10 times the rate. I will say, though, there is going to be somewhat of a demand for the old way of doing things, but it's going to become a lot more boutique and specific and expensive than the new way of doing things. You know, I think about cars, for example. At some point, we're all going to be driving electric cars. They're all going to be self-automated. They're going to propel themselves down the highway without us having to do much work. But I think there will always be a market for my 76 International carbureted truck, just not to the degree that it is right now. Because some people are just going to want to pay a little extra and smell that carburetor and smell that fuel and feel that horsepower and be able to press on the brake and press on the gas and turn the wheel. So there will always be a market for that, but it's going to be significantly and drastically reduced. I'll say one more thing on this. When I was doing my financial planning stuff, I always thought my job was to coach people about money. But everybody knows the principles of money. Every single person on the planet. We all know because we interact with it so often that those rules have just become embedded. The degree to which you implement those rules is the real question. So my job was never about teaching people the rules of money. My job, and this is where I got really good at my business, is I became a coach of people and their behaviors. Because if I said, what's the first rule of investing, 10 out of 10 people could say, buy low, sell high. But 9 out of 10 people do not do that. They buy high and they sell low. So my job became, I have to manage you, not your money. You're the problem. The money's not the issue. It's you. And that's where we make ourselves invaluable.
And dude, just to reiterate, this is so important because literally I had this conversation with the project team last week, struggling on a project, and they're all doubling down on the tech. And I'm like, this is all about the relationship. This is all about managing expectation. No. This is how we do UAT. No, did you manage and set the expectation that that's what it looks like for them? Oh, no, but this is how it's done. They don't know that.
We don't know. I don't know.
You got to manage those expectations, right? They're not going to know these things. And whenever you change something or you don't meet my expectation, whether it's true, right, wrong, or indifferent, if it shows up differently than what I expected, we have a problem. Even if you did it perfect. It's all about managing the human behavior and the expectations of it. It's crazy. But we get our blinders on and we're like, oh, no, I did the thing. And it's like, no, you're dealing with humans. This is way more complex than that,
I think educated people are at greater risk for those reasons. They think their education makes them impervious to it. I'll give you one other example. We got to drive on to the next question, but a real world example is I've hired a marketing firm to help me with some digital marketing for Order of Man. And it's just data. We can look at 2 ads and say that one did better than that one.
Yeah.
it's just data. Facebook does it. All the algorithms do it. That's not anything they're doing. I'm not dumb. I'm not unaware that they're just interpreting data. But where I get a lot of value from them is when we have our calls, we have a weekly call, and they explain it to me. And they tell me why it is the way it is, or why this ad might take a little longer, or why it would be important to start doing this ad now, even though it might not really generate revenue until 90 days from now. Like, it's the relationship, to your point. It's not the data.
Yeah.
They're worse with the data than the computer could be. So let the computer do its thing, and let's us focus on the human interaction and relationship.
Yeah, it's great. Elijah Fisher, girl dad here. What are some important tips in raising daughters? I have 2 small girls. One is 4 and the other will be 6 months. I hear a lot of good advice around boys, but does anyone have good insights on raising girls? Thanks.
I don't know, man. I'm struggling. I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and the dynamic, full disclosure, the dynamic's hard because she's with her mom, and then she's with me, and the rules are probably slightly different, and the expectations are maybe not clear. And I would like to hear your answer to this question, because I don't feel like I'm in the position to say, here's what you should do, because I clearly do not have this figured out.
Yeah. I'll use my daughter Kalani as an example of, I think, what works well. So for whatever reason, her and my wife, they butt heads.
You've told us that. Yeah, I've heard you say that
before. They get super after each other. They both get triggered, including my wife. And for whatever reason, when that happens, I have a flood of empathy. I think God knows that, like, hey, someone's got to have some empathy here. And so I get clear-minded, and I'm like, I see the circumstance, no big deal. And I usually don't get drawn in, luckily, right? So, and I think it's a dynamic. I'm sure you've seen that in your marriage, where, like, when someone's running hot, all of a sudden you'll counter it with a little bit of cold, to try to balance out the family dynamic. Anyhow, I have to be very slow and, like, honey, explain how you feel a lot. And why would you feel that way? Because of this. Well, is that true, or is that what you're assuming she's thinking? Yeah. And it doesn't take, I can't do it quick. It requires a whole sit down, and I feel like I'm wasting like an hour talking. But it has this big margin of conversation that has to happen. And it's super in the space of, like, I feel like I'm being way more sensitive and super empathetic, where I'm not placing any judgment whatsoever, because it will just trigger her worse. And now I'm against her as well, kind of thing. But it's really like, a lot of it is just emotional regulation is what I feel like I'm doing most of the time when they're a little sideways around how do they feel and why do they feel that way, and helping them see the difference of what they've interpreted versus reality. And then reminding them, because they have superpowers. I think my daughters and my wife have superpowers in the space of emotional connection. And so I capitalize on that. Do you think mom is intentionally trying to make you mad? Do you think she's trying to do the right thing? And then,
the first answer has got to be yes. She's doing it deliberately.
I think she's totally.
Be yes.
Yeah, and she has said that a couple times. She's like, oh, she's totally doing it on purpose. But I'm like, but really, she's not, right? And we're not perfect. Going back to the questions that we said earlier, some of our responses earlier around, we're all human. We're making mistakes. Yeah. There's more going on. She might be having a bad day because of X, Y, Z, and you don't even know about that, right? And so I double down on helping them use their superpower of empathy and emotional connection to kind of get aligned. Other than that, we try to just embrace how loving and caring they are. But I don't know a lot of that stuff would be any different for a girl than a boy, right? Other than just the empathetic side. Yeah.
I like it.
For what it's worth. Carlos Del Campo What are some tips for learning to not need the validation of others, those outside your most inner circle? Tips for learning to not need validation from others.
Yeah, I would just say, are you dialed in? And are you aware of what you're good at and what you're not good at? So we can look at the realm of finances, look at the realm of your fitness, connections and relationships, your intelligence, your purpose. I think if you're tied to a purpose, you're less likely to be subject to the whims of other people and how they feel about you, because you're so clear on what your purpose is that you're not easily distracted or dissuaded from what you think is important. But when you start locking in everything, you're eating right, you're working out every day. And I would also say, maybe the root is this. If we strip everything else away, maybe the way you begin to validate yourself is by keeping the commitments to yourself on a daily basis. Yeah. So if last night you said, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 tomorrow and I'm going to go into the gym and work out. If you do that, you will need less validation from others today than you did the day before. And then if you do that for 30 days in a row or 365 days in a row, nothing anybody says to you about your fitness or strength or the way you look is going to be an issue. It's when we fall short of our commitments that we start to question who we are as people because we're out of integrity. And so those little chinks in the armor can be exposed through other people. And we think that if somebody says, oh, no, you look good, that it substitutes actually doing the work to look good. But if you look good and you know you do and you know how hard you've worked, you don't need somebody to tell you that. It's nice when they do, but you don't need it. I would also say that the more options you give yourself, the less inclined you are to be reliant on one person's opinion of you. So if you have multiple opportunities to create and build wealth, or multiple career paths that you can take, and your boss asks you to do something or thinks less of you or asks you to jeopardize your morals or asks you to stay late, you're not beholden to that. You get to live the life that you want because you have the options to do something else outside of what other people want you to do. So create options. And by the way, that goes back to living in integrity. You create options by living in integrity. Living in integrity, for example, when it comes to finances, is if you say, I'm going to budget, I'm going to save money, it means you don't go get yourself a energy drink and a breakfast burrito, which is something I like to do. But you're not going to do that because you're not interested in spending the $5 or $6 because you're taking that money and you're saving that towards something else. And when you're in alignment that way, now you have $5 a day, $25 a week, $100 a month, $1,200 a year with interest makes it $1,400. So over 3-4 years, all of a sudden you've got $4,500, $4,700 that might be a deposit on a truck. Or you might be able to pay off that medical debt that's been hanging over your head for the past 5 or 6 years. So all of these little decisions matter because they create a sense of sovereignty and a sense of integrity. And when you have sovereignty and integrity, you're untouchable. You really are.
Yeah. Well, and when we're out of integrity, it has to be justified for you to live with yourself. And so not only, like if we're in integrity, we get this benefit, but when we're out of integrity, man, it's a slippery slope. Because the minute I start practicing self-betrayal, I have to excuse it. So now I'll start allocating blame. I'll start excusing it. One of the questions earlier around having empathy, and I thought about this, but I didn't share. It's like it's a lot easier to be empathetic when you're in integrity. It's hard to do when you're out of integrity because you're lashing out at everybody. When you're out of integrity and you're looking to control things and you're looking to allocate blame to justify your way of showing up. I mean, it gets wild. It's crazy on how sideways you can get when you're practicing what I love this phrase, when you're practicing self-betrayal. You're betraying yourself. It's great.
There's one other thing, and this is a effort that I'm not great at, but I realize when I do this, that it seems to be better is we've already talked about at length today about how people are flawed. And when you're seeking validation from a mentor or a boss or a woman or your children, it's inferior to seeking a source of validation that is perfect, which is Christ. It's a perfect source of validation because it's not flawed and it's immovable and it's steadfast like a rock, and it will always be there, and it's not biased, and it doesn't justify its own his own behavior. It's perfect. And like I said, I'm not great at this, but the times that I've been the most spiritual in my life are also happen to be the times where I need less outside validation, because I know who I am, I know what potential I have, and I'm striving to live in integrity with it.
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question. Well, actually, we have two if we can get to these. All right, Billy Joe. It's been a while, Billy, actually. In January, your episode with Brandon Mancini, which was a nugget-filled one, you mentioned your son doing powerlifting and the role his coach played with both your growth in it. I'm a high school powerlifter. I'm a high school powerlifting coach here in New Mexico. What was it that made the coach so impactful to you as a parent and for your son? Those numbers you put on are very impressive. Thank you, Ryan and Kipp. Stay strong. Thank you again for helping in the course correction of my life. Always grateful. A life saved by the IC in order of man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, cool. I'm glad you're doing some coaching for your kids for powerlifting, because that was really transformative for Brecken. I think as a dad, the thing that I got right, and I've got a lot wrong on this, but the thing I got right with him and his coach is that I honored their relationship. And a lot of men won't do that because it's threatening. And there were times where my oldest son, Brecken, would come home and he would talk about Coach Moore and how good he was and how wonderful and how amazing and how strong. And I had to sit there and listen to it. And it wasn't a personal indictment, but I took it that way. Sure, of course. I was like, well, he can't do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
But I realized pretty quickly that his coach was a good man, and that if I want my children to be good people, they're gonna need to have outside influences. In fact, it's a requirement if I'm their dad, because they're gonna need a lot of work outside of what I can offer them.
Yeah.
So I honored their relationship by thanking their coach, by speaking publicly about their coach, by not ever throwing his coach under the bus. You know, if Brecken would come home and maybe he would be upset about something regarding powerlifting, I would say, well, what does your coach think about it? I don't know. Or if you had an issue, well, did you talk with Coach Moore? No. Well, why are you talking to me about it? I don't know. But I trusted him, and if my son would go talk to him, I knew Coach Moore would shoot straight with him. So I think that's the best thing you can do as a parent when there's a good coaching relationship, is to honor it, edify it, and support it. And don't undermine it. From the coaching perspective, the thing I liked about Coach Moore, probably more than anything, is, well, a lot of things. He was very knowledgeable, so he had the credibility to coach these kids. And he was very strict, but he was never an asshole, but very strict. Like, hey, we're not joking around. This is not a joke. Like, here's the proper way to do it. He would call the kids out, but he always did it from a place of, I care about you, which is why I'm holding you accountable. And he never let my son or any child that I saw him coach, he never let them slack. And then there's a picture I have where my son was at a powerlifting meet. It's probably one of his first ones. And I took the picture. I think he was doing a deadlift. And I have my son locked out at the deadlift, probably hit a PR because he was really, really good at all of those things. And I took this picture, and later I looked at it, and I saw behind him, his coach, there's a curtain behind the stage in these powerlifting meets, but there's enough of a separation in the curtain where the coach can observe the lift to judge. And coach was like squatted down, and he was watching, but he was like smiling. Like you could see the emotion and the excitement as my son pulled that deadlift. And you could see how excited he was. And I think that was one of the best things about it, is not that he lived vicariously through him, but that he relished is probably not the right word. He was as excited when his athletes performed to their capability as the athlete was themselves. And those were things that I will never forget about him. He's a great guy and a great coach.
All right, Steve Terrell. Why don't many men support their friends during hospital stays? Is it because we don't like to be reminded that we are not invincible?
Yeah, probably. Also, what do you want me to do? I mean, that might be a little harsh, but Kipp, if you're in the hospital and you're like, hey, I have a broken leg or something, I'm like, cool, I'll come and like say, hey, dude, feel better. But then, like, I don't know what you want me to do. You know what I mean? I also think, like, if I'm in the hospital, I don't want anybody to be burdened by me. I'm hung up. I've pride myself on being a man of value, and now I'm just mooching off of everybody. So I think that's probably a dynamic that is taken into consideration as well. You know, it's like, I don't know. I just don't think we're that close or really understand the softer side of being a friend. If you said, Kipp, to me, you said, hey, man, will you help me come move? Like, yeah, of course. I'll bring my truck. We'll go move. If you said, hey, I'm in the hospital, can you come see me? I'd be like, like, are you going to be okay? Or are you dying? Like how serious is it? And if it's serious, I might.
Well, how much time do we have? I mean, like,
are you terminal? Like, do you have like today, or like what's the prognosis here? Yeah. I don't actually know, but I can see some truth to your statement for sure.
Totally.
What do you think?
I'm laughing because it's weird. It's totally true. I have a brother that's not doing very well, and I was talking with one of my older brothers and said, hey, should we go down and visit him? And he's like, well, there's nothing for us to do.
Exactly.
Right? So his default was, oh, go help. Well, there's nothing to help with.
Right.
Right. And then I was like, yeah, you're right. And then I was like, we could just have lunch. and both of us were like kind of awkward, right? We're like, well, yeah, like that doesn't feel as like we should, but we probably should,
Right.
So it's funny how that is. I think it's just we move to let's resolve, right? And is this something that is going to allow me to resolve or serve? Oh, it's just a visit. And that doesn't come as natural, right?
Yeah. I mean, it gets me thinking maybe we can game it a little bit more and actually like do something that we feel is doing something. And I don't even know what that looks like. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to watch the game anyway, so I'm going to come over and we're going to watch the game in the room, and I'll bring whatever food is appropriate that you can have based on your condition. But I don't know. Or maybe it's I don't even know. I guess that's why it's so hard. I don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worthy of consideration, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope he's doing okay. Maybe he's in the hospital. He's like, why isn't anybody coming to see me? So if that's why you're asking, I hope you're doing okay. Let us know. We don't know what to do.
Let us know if you need anything. We're not going to come visit, but let us know if you need anything.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be like, can I just like, I don't know, what's your deductible? Can I send you a few $100s or so? Would that be helpful? Like,
that's funny. All right, sir. That's a wrap.
We got them all.
Yeah.
Good.
So connect with Mr. Michler on X and Instagram at Ryan Michler. Kind of our call to action still is the Men's Forge event. That's themensforge.com coming this May 1st through the 4th.
Yep. Would love to see you there. We got a good lineup. We've locked in some speakers. Dr. Robert Glover, Sathya Sam on overcoming pornography addiction, Matt Vincent, Matt Boudreau, Larry Hagner, myself, Connor Beaton with Man Talks. Like, it's a pretty powerhouse lineup, and we would love to see you there. I think we have just a few VIP spots, but even if you just wanted to come generally as well, there's a lot of spots available, and we'd love to have as many of you there as we can. All right, guys. Well, that's all we've got. Great questions today. There was a few that I was stumped. I couldn't answer. So I like those kind of questions. Hopefully we gave you something to consider. I don't know. That's what we're trying to do. Maybe we're just trying to figure this out for ourselves, which certainly it helps me. So I appreciate the questions. All right, guys. We'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.